Welcome to today's PRC Insights webinar from our survey. My name is Leo Springate and I'm a Senior Operations Manager here at the AHRC. We're really delighted to have so many of you with us on the call today. I just want to highlight a few kind of housekeeping things before we begin the main content of the webinar. We have British Sign Language interpreters joining us today. We've got Ruth Edgoose and Greg Colhoun, and they will be kind of pinned throughout so they're visible to all. Please do feel free to adjust your settings so you can resize elements of the screen as best suits you. And you can also turn on the kind of closed captions should you wish. We'll be with you for about an hour today. Our Professor Christopher Smith will begin with an introduction, and we'll then have a presentation around some of the key data from my colleague Beth, and then some reflections on the insights that provided to us by the survey from Christopher, and then there'll be some time for questions at the end. Please do submit questions throughout the webinar using the kind of Q&A function. Our colleagues will be beavering away in the background to collate those, and we'll do our best to answer as many of those as we can. But any that we don't get around to, we'll produce a synthesis response afterwards, and these will all be shared with you and the webinar recording, which is being recorded today, in the next PRC newsletter, which will be coming to you over the next few weeks. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Christopher to introduce us.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. And I particularly want to thank members of the Peer Review College. Your work is so incredibly important to us. It's the bedrock of how we can do our business of funding excellent research and innovation wherever we find it in our enormously exciting community. So thank you all very, very much for the work that you've done. I'm also grateful for those of you who filled in the survey, taking the time to provide feedback for us and for coming along today. It's really important for us to understand your concerns and to learn from your ideas. This survey is another step in our journey towards transforming the Arts and Humanities Research Council into a more responsive and more listening organisation. You're at the heart of our decision-making process, and your perspectives are so valuable, and perhaps especially now when we know the sector is facing significant challenge. Having a great dialogue like this, an open dialogue, is very important. We said in our strategic delivery plan for AHRC, drawing from the wider UKRI strategy, that we wanted to be a learning organisation. We've delivered a theory of change, which is about empowering people to bring about change. We know we have to be effective and efficient in our operations, transparent and open in planning and decision-making, and rigorous in evaluating performance. Those are our pledges. And you will know, I think, that the size of AHRC is reducing. So we need to work really carefully with you to be effective in the way that we operate. We also need to hold to the Tickell report about efficiency for applicants and for review processes. And we need to manage all this whilst holding ourselves absolutely to the highest standards for quality, diversity and inclusion. There's lots going on at the moment with new response mode schemes, changes to the funding service, strategic investments such as Thrive, the new research project led by University of Liverpool, dedicated to redefining how research teams operate with greater diversity and inclusion. So it's busy, there's lots going on, and it's great to be able to check it. The results of the survey offer a baseline for the community, for our strategic direction, and particularly relevant as we step up our advocacy activities in advance of the fiscal events that we know will come through spending reviews, probably a couple of spending reviews. We have some key desires, what we want to do, and in particular, we need to make sure that we make the strongest possible case for the AHRC budget to be right-sized to the demands of the contemporary. Includes things like making sure that we respond properly to the shifts in the digital world. We also know that this next year, and the one to come, are going to be pretty challenging. So we need to understand how to defend what we do and what we do best, both in response mode and also in funding strategically that allows us to be a full part of UKRI. This process gives us a chance to understand your views, and it's an exercise we'll want to undertake every year to, in different ways perhaps, but to get your feedback to improve our processes, reflect on challenges, measure our progress. So it's now time to see what it is that you said. So I'm going to hand over to Beth to present the data insights, and I hope you'll find this really fascinating as we have done. Beth.
Thanks, Christopher. I will just share my slides now. If any of my colleagues could give me a thumbs up to just check they're sharing okay. Fabulous. So good morning, everyone. I'm Beth Marygold, and I'm an operations manager for the Peer Review College, and I'm just going to talk you through the key insights taken from the survey today. Apologies in advance if I'm a bit croaky. I've got a bit of a cold at the moment, but hopefully I'm coming across clearly and it won't be too disruptive today. So the survey opened back in October of last year, and it was open for 5 weeks. And during that time, we had 201 responses, which is around 17% of the college, which is fantastic. So a huge thank you for engaging so much with this. The survey closed in November, and we then gathered all of the responses, and we've been working on analysing the data, pulling out key findings and reflecting on what you've told us since then. The key findings that we wanted to highlight to you today are along the right-hand side of this slide, and they are, number one, being a member of AHRC's PRC adds real value to careers. Number two, AHRC's place in the funding landscape is well defined, but greater clarity on our strategic priorities and further engagement with the PRC could drive greater alignment of funding recommendations to organisational strategy. Number three, there is awareness of AHRC's intention to embed EDI across all that we do, but there is more that we can explore with regards to advocacy, sector support, call design and assessment. And number four, last but not least, our PRC reflects a sector that feels uncertain about the future, with a strong emphasis placed upon the potential for a general election in 2024. So I'm going to share with you and explore the data behind these insights in the following slides, and then Christopher will offer some of his reflections afterwards. So diving into the first insight around the value that being a member of the PRC adds to careers. So the key figures here were taken from the questions that we asked you surrounding transforming our process, your overall experience of our assessment process and policy, and your engagement with us. So 85% agreed overall that assessing applications for us has helped improve their own applications and applications for others in their organisation to AHRC or other funders. And 81% agreed that doing that assessing has given them greater insight into the sector. 78% agreed that being a member of the PRC and engagement with us contributes to their ability to be an advocate for the arts and humanities. So we're really pleased to see just how much of a positive learning experience members have and the outcomes that are generated through PRC membership, including via an enhanced understanding of the funding landscape and strategic drivers in the arts and humanities, and in supporting their own funding capture as well. We can also see here how PRC membership isn't only beneficial for the individual, but that it also has a wider positive impact for the community, including through that element of knowledge sharing when supporting others to construct applications and in empowering our members to advocate. Looking at engagement, as we'd expect, the top ways that members engaged with us over 2023 were reported as being via completing written peer review for us, with 85% of respondents selecting this, followed by 67% who have attended a webinar or an event. And as members, you are much more likely to complete a review for us than sit on a panel during your membership. And it's really encouraging to see that so many of you have been able to review for us in the past year. And we know how busy you are and how often you're doing this alongside other wider competing commitments within and outside your organisations. And I know we say it a lot, but it really, really is appreciated, and we couldn't do what we do without you. We've noted that PRC engagement with us is high, but throughout the survey, respondents have told us that they would like more guidance, training and support, and that's something we'll certainly take away. So we're really pleased that membership is beneficial, and we want to keep ensuring that that's the case. and that we're making the investment of being on the PRC even easier for you, thinking about proportionality and making things simpler and better for you so that you get that benefit. And that looks like us exploring the following opportunities. So there's an opportunity here related to the value of PRC membership. So this has really set us thinking about how we communicate the expectations, value and benefits of being a PRC member. We'd also like to explore revamping the PRC training suite. So this is something that's been on our list to do. And with the context of the Simpler Better funding programme, that's given us the conditions to think more broadly about how we provide training, not only in AHRC, but also in other councils, exploring how we can join up with them and bring you the best practice from across UKRI, making that training simpler and clearer. There also seems to be appetite coming through for panellist and chair training, so this is something else we'd like to explore further. In addition to this, we want to look at other routes to PRC membership that aren't just via those large-scale recruitment rounds every 2 to 4 years, so we can create as diverse a college as possible and ensure we have the right amount of expertise in the right areas for the funding opportunities that we're running. And then moving on to actions, we're committed to ensuring that we continue to improve the reviewer and panellist guidance over this year. So moving on to the second insight, this is surrounding our vision and strategy and the extent to which you're aware of AHRC's commitments within the strategic delivery plan and the theory of change, and your perceptions of our success in delivering against them. So with regards to our position as a funder, 62% agree that our place in the UK's funding ecosystem is well defined and complementary of other funders' offers, which is really good to see. And hopefully the changes to our responsive mode schemes can further support this, and we know there's still more for us to do. Responses here also showed that 3/4 of those surveyed are familiar with the strategic delivery plan and theory of change, and we're really pleased to see that. But whilst it is a good start, through the comments in the survey, we've noticed that although most of the PRC are familiar with the strategic delivery plan, they perhaps feel unclear about our strategic priorities and how we're going to drive change. So there is still some work for us to do on this front, and we need to be clearer and more explicit here. And I know that's something that Christopher wants to pick up on straight away today. Exploring a bit further into our strategic objectives, so high risk, high reward is very topical for us at the moment. And in the question that we asked you surrounding confidence levels in assessing particular elements of applications, there's a general level of confidence across the board. However, assessing high risk, high reward research came out with the lowest net confidence level. So members are telling us that they don't feel as equipped as they could to assess this element. And that's certainly highlighted that we need to support you with extra guidance here and better articulate our vision of this to you so that we're appropriately equipping you to come on that journey with us. And that's also similar for assessing practice-based or practice-led research as well. So moving to opportunities, there's certainly appetite for us to ensure that guidance on the assessment of high risk, high reward research is included within our PRC training offering. We want to ensure that you're equipped to spot this potential and you're not discouraged from funding it. Similarly, for practice-based or practice-led research, there's scope for us to explore support here through training and through diversifying our college membership. We know there's also a bigger picture at play here in the wider sector, and we want to better articulate our role as advocates for this type of research. There's an opportunity here for us to reflect on our position as a funder and potential for us to do some further exploration and gain greater understanding surrounding our distinctiveness. And then thinking about shorter term actions. So today's webinar and our PRC newsletters are opportunities for us to provide more clarity and explanation on what we are doing and our strategic priorities. And as I mentioned before, Christopher will touch on this in his reflections shortly. Moving on to our next insight. There is awareness of our intention to embed EDI across all that we do, but there is more that we can explore with regards to advocacy, sector support, call design and assessment. And the questions in this section of the survey similarly focused on the extent to which you're aware of our commitments within our EDI action plan and perceptions of our success in delivering against those and informing our approach. So responses here showed us that our members are more familiar with the EDI action plan than with our strategic delivery plan and theory of change, with 85% having some level of familiarity, which is a fantastic start for us. Just under half of those surveyed, however, agreed that our funding opportunities, policies and processes meaningfully engage with issues of equality, diversity and inclusion, and 37% of you were unsure if that was the case. There's clearly work for us to do here, and we need to be more transparent about what we are doing. When asked what the most impactful thing was that we could do to advance equality, diversity and inclusion in the sector, the responses were fairly evenly split here into some broader categories surrounding call design, assessment and funding outcomes, and advocacy and sector support, and it highlights that it is a complex picture with multiple factors at play. We've noted that members want us to directly engage, consult and support people in the sector, help them be familiar with our schemes and how to put together a good application and involve them in decision making. And the responses have given us lots of ideas to dive into and explore here. So a big thank you for all the suggestions that you've made. It's also been really good to see here that the move to the funding service and the changes to our responsive mode schemes have been really welcome as well. Looking to opportunities, so responses have shown some appetite for us to explore other assessment mechanisms and criteria. For example, a lottery approach has been highlighted, and the UKRI review of peer review was conducted last year, and we're keeping tabs on other activity in this space across UKRI to set us up to support innovative steps across the organisation in this space. Responses have also highlighted lots of best practice from other funders, which we can explore and learn from. We're also currently scoping out a PRC development plan, which would include improved PRC training with EDI content, exploring ways to further diversify our pool of panellists and panel chairs, doing more consultations with our members, and thinking about how we'll drive increased diversity in our next recruitment round. And as part of this, as I mentioned before, we'll be thinking about broadening and exploring other routes to membership. We're also committed to making some enhancements to our PRC newsletter, where we'd like to begin including a regular EDI spotlight to showcase successes and better explain what we're doing with regards to EDI. And the survey shows that we do need to explain ourselves better and ensure that we're being transparent. The final insight to share with you today is that the PRC reflects a sector that feels uncertain about the future, with a strong emphasis placed upon the potential for a general election this year. So members are generally evenly split on their feelings towards the future of their research areas, and the responses show that there is awareness about the health of disciplines, with 41% agreeing that they are optimistic about the future of their research area, 41% disagreeing, and 18% neither agreeing nor disagreeing. We also asked you questions around the biggest challenges currently facing the arts and humanities and the biggest opportunity for the sector that you anticipate arising in the next year. The key challenges highlighted largely focus on the current political and social context and the financial impact of this. Perceptions of hostility and a lack of support from government and feelings of STEM privilege within government policy, academia and funding have come through in the responses, and there's a shared feeling that the arts and humanities are viewed as less important and that this filters through to wider society. Disciplinary health and the talent pipeline are also a key concern, with the reduction in PhD funding and declining student numbers presenting a real challenge to the community. The opportunity for advocacy has also been noted, and the potential to do this within education, engaging younger generations and articulating our value in the education system. Responses have also noted the potential that arts and humanities can bring to addressing and responding to global challenges as well. So there's definitely some reflecting that we'll be doing here around understanding the challenges that you and the community are facing and reflecting on the levers that we have at our disposal. So that's it from me this morning. I hope that you found the key data highlights interesting. We'll be exploring sharing more of this data with you via the PRC newsletter over future editions, and it is an extremely valuable benchmark for us to compare against over the coming years as we repeat the survey again. So a big thank you, and I will pass back to Christopher to share some of his reflections with you now.
Beth, thank you. That was, I hope, as helpful for you as I found it. Just really great to see those insights drawn out. And I just want to spend 10 minutes or so just running through a few reactions from us and AHRC before opening up to your questions. I know that other questions got into the chat, which we have noted. And when it says dismissed, it doesn't mean we've been dismissive. We've captured it. Thank you. First of all, explaining ourselves better. All of us know that communication is one of the trickiest things to do, and particularly, I suppose, in quite a difficult communicative landscape. So many of the things that we used to be able to rely on, like certain aspects of social media, aren't working as well as they used to. And I realize that you're all busy folk and you won't rush to pluck the strategic delivery plan off the shelf on a daily basis. But let me just reiterate what I think are the absolutely key areas that we are going to invest in. We will continue to invest in responsive mode research. We've changed the nature of the scheme, but we are still absolutely committed to that being the core part. Your ideas will always be better than ours. And that does include funding PhD. We are now, and we will continue to be, the largest proportionate spender on PhDs in UKRI. We are absolutely committed to contemporary challenges in that broad sense. So we know that response mode work will lead us to tackle the big questions of the day, but we can also pick from those particular areas. At the moment, the key areas for us are responsible AI, arts and humanities for health, and design for a green transition. Those three areas are three of our big strategic investments, but there's a lot more that's coming through, and we will always be trying to flag those through the AHRC blog, through the PRC newsletter, and there will at some stage be a revision of the strategic delivery plan. We are committed to supporting the cultural and creative economy, and we're committed to supporting a broad concept of the cultural assets that we have, which includes facilitating the relationship between universities and museums, galleries, and other owners of cultural assets, working in communities, upskilling to allow the relationships to thrive, which feeds into the brilliant impact case studies that we do, but also, I think, increasingly thinking about the broad notion of digital humanities. So that set, discovery, research, contemporary challenges, cultural assets, and creative and cultural economy, wrapping around a strong skills agenda and thinking globally. That is basically our strategic delivery plan. We will continue to develop programs, often with members of the community. So a good example is the Law and Social Justice Claim call, which we did very, very consultatively. And the result of that was very high numbers of people wanting to be part of it. We'll also be advocating as much as we can in the right way for the role of arts and humanities within UKRI and more broadly. And I try to do that in my own voice, but we will keep on using the advisory board and other parts of AHRC to just sharpen our messages and hone what we say. Now, another area that came out was a lack of confidence, perhaps marginal lack of confidence in high risk, high reward and practice-based research. So just a couple of things here. We know that we need to give a better steer perhaps on what we mean here. On practice-based research, we're working increasingly with colleagues in practice-based areas, or whichever language you want to choose, just to think a little bit about how we embed that in our work and how we assess it. I think this is a long journey. It's not something we're going to instantly fix. But it's really important that we have practice-based researchers on our peer review college. That's the best way of making sure that we get success, by having people who are embedded in this practice being represented on the college. We've also done a lot of work, I think, in lived experience research, working with lived experience individuals, for instance, in modern slavery, but elsewhere too. That's pretty challenging, but I think it's really important that we try and experiment and we learn. So all the time we are putting in the evaluation and then hope to disseminate that evaluation out to the community. On the transformation of our response mode, we are really trying to signal that we are interested in your ambitions and funding ambitious novel research. And part of that is because we recognize that arts and humanities, many practitioners are crossing boundaries, working in interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary ways, and they're looking for us to respond. Now, I think at this point I need to say very clearly that AHRC is only one of the funders in the landscape. There are other funders, and because we're associated with Horizon Europe, we have that huge opportunity to use those funds. Traditionally, Horizon Europe has been a larger funder of arts and humanities than we have been in AHRC. Secondly, we have to remember that QR for arts and humanities is a significantly larger proportion of funds than the Research Council. So we have about £70 million of baseline funding, and QR is sitting at well over 200 million a year. So however it's used in your organizations, there is a lot of response mode, undirected research funding that is available, which means that we need to respond to be strategic and to encourage perhaps the things which require a little bit more funding or a little bit more novel and ambitious. So that's why when we're briefing the panels for curiosity, we're looking for intellectual risk, for people who are doing new things, who are not in the same place as before. And that reflects, I think, UKRI commitment to think in an interdisciplinary way. I understand that some people have been a little bit worried about whether this means that we're encouraging people to take personal risk. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We're not in any way cutting through safeguarding and ethics. And in fact, I would want to say that I think all universities are going to have to think much more about the relationship between arts and humanities and their ethics committees, just to be sure that we're in the right space and that the ethics committees are actually helping us to deliver research with integrity in what are quite difficult times and very challenging topics to discuss. Working with lived experience, for instance, requires a lot of care and a lot of thought. It's great that we're doing it. We need to do it with care and transparently. So we're up for taking more risk and being open to a broader set of ideas, methodologies, people, and challenges. Panel briefings are a first step in helping us work through with you how to embrace this way of thinking, focusing on the outcomes we and the projects want and interrogating the credibility of the pathway to get there. And we'll continue to pick up this theme in our panelist guidance. Concerns around the future, these are huge. We recognise them. I've touched on advocacy and we will continue to do that. And maybe that will be something we can return to in the questions. EDI, well, this is part of the challenge, but it's also something we are really committed to doing better on. We have an action plan to focus EDI across all that we do and embed it into continuous improvement. We're trying to address barriers to engagement on a call-by-call basis. We use an equality impact assessment on every call to consider barriers applicants may face and how we can mitigate them. With the PRC, we embedded EDI into recruitment of new members 2 years ago, and we're going to continue to keep pushing for as much diversity and inclusion as possible. And I hope that you can see this working through other areas of what we do. But the statistics that were recently published show that we've still got a very long way to go. So that's going to be a focus for us as we move forward, and we'll need your help to ensure that we're getting our panels and our thinking right, and that we're really thinking about that notion of what excellence means. So excellence doesn't just mean one thing. You've got to think about excellence for what, and we should also be thinking in some of our calls, I believe, about how we can be excellent at being sure they are as open, inclusive, and equitable as they can be. And that is particularly important in our international engagement. I know that AHRC was particularly hard hit when we lost our funding for ODA and Global Research Challenge, and that's made it harder for us to rebuild our equitable partnering. But we're really trying now in concert with others across UKRI, and that's going to be very important as we look at future years, and I hope a return to 0.7 as a target for official development assistance. So just to finish with a few of the next steps we're taking, we're thrilled to see how beneficial being a PRC member is to you. We want to continue that sense that you have and ensure you're getting the support you need from us. We're going to use the quarterly PRC newsletters to put in better explanations of what we're doing and try to keep you up to speed with what's happening around fiscal events. That keeps you in the loop, but of course it depends on you reading them. So any ideas that you may have, how we can make those more helpful, any other forms of communication. We do blog quite regularly to the AHRC website. It's not getting a huge amount of traction, so maybe there are other ways in which we could engage with you. But we would also just encourage you as PRC members to talk to colleagues and just direct them to the kinds of information that are available. Please share the PRC newsletter as much as you wish. We also want to diversify college membership even further as we plan our next recruitment round, and we'll continue to look at diversity when we build panels, as well as offer better, improved training and guidance. And yes, we will do this survey again, because we think it's a really important way of staying in touch. It's created, I hope, we're going to go into a dialogue, a conversation, which matters so much to me and to everybody, all my colleagues at AHRC. And lastly, just to say, this is extremely important right now. We all know that there's been a lot of attention on some AHRC investments for not necessarily helpful ways, and not nearly enough attention on all the other investments we're making that are equally brilliant and totally wonderful. We don't always get credit, I think, that we're due for some of the really innovative and novel things that we're doing. Some of them are very big, so the big wins from central funds like the infrastructure funds, CoStar for virtual screen production, Conservation, Heritage, Science and Riches, Disco for joining up our scientific collections. They're not coming from our baseline. We won them by our initiative and our innovation. But we also know that every single research project, and many that don't get funded directly by us, are making huge differences to communities, practice, and communities in place. So there's huge amounts to celebrate, and we need to do that. We need to get our story absolutely right as we go into the fiscal events and across changes in administration that might happen. We look forward to this conversation as part of the way that we sharpen our message. So Ruth, Leo, Beth are with me to manage the Q&A. And I'm going to stop now and hand over, I think, to Natalie, who's going to help us as well. So looking forward to hearing what you want to hear from us.
Hello. So we've had a few questions come in. Please keep them coming in. But I'd like to start with a more general question, if I may. So some of our new schemes, such as the Curiosity and Catalyst Awards, are coming up to a year old. I wonder whether I might ask either Christopher or Ruth, do you have any reflections on their first year?
I have a quick go and just a couple of very fast things. I've been thrilled at how excited people have been. It's not often that you walk into a room and people say, we're quite excited about the way you've reframed a call. So that's great. but it's only happened because we work really closely with you. So that's exciting. I think I'm really keen to let this bed in before we do a quick evaluation. It's too soon. You've got to get used to it. We've got to get used to it. And we know that we'd love to be able to fund more than we actually can. But I think we'll learn through this process. And what I do want to say is that I'm keen for us to learn quick lessons about small things that we can do to make it better. But I also don't want AHRC to get into the habit of throwing the whole thing up in the air on a very regular basis, because I don't think that helps. So my first reaction is great to see your enthusiasm and excitement. Let's learn together to make this scheme really work over a good medium term. Ruth? Leo?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, off the back of some of the panels that we've seen at the early stages in those first rounds, the really exciting thing actually is seeing how applicants have really embraced more of the outcomes-led way of thinking that we're trying to really push through within our responsive mode schemes. So really welcoming that increased flexibility. I would say there's a little bit more to go in terms of maybe how we can support applicants to be more confident and how they really craft that case, being bold and ambitious, really coming in for exactly what they need and making a very strong argument for that. The other reflection is, as with anything across our funding, I think it's quite clear for reviewers and panel members when applicants have really taken the time to understand the purpose of the scheme and then built their application around that, rather than trying to retrofit maybe a sort of pre-existing idea onto something else. And indeed, the ones that actually engage with their research officers early doors. Again, I think that's something that generally is sort of identified and comes through and really strengthens an application. I think it's also fair to say we are still reasonably early stage with these schemes, and very much what Christopher's saying around we want to be open to our quick wins that then take time to consolidate when we think about any potential sort of larger changes, make sure we're using all the evidence at our disposal in order to do that. We will be releasing different bits of comms as well as we go, so we can expect to see some more blog posts from us, reflections in our newsletters, etc. As we explore this journey further.
Thank you both. So one of the other recent changes we've seen is the implementation of TFS. We've had a question from one of the PRC members who says they're experiencing delays in applications via the funding service. I wonder if you could comment on this or give any advice to PRC members if or when this occurs.
I'll dive in, but everybody else, please do add thoughts thereafter. So in terms of the transition to the funding service, we know that there'll be disruption when we move between systems. It's an unfortunate part of having to make that sort of change. We hope it's going to be worth it in the long run. We're already seeing some benefits there. What we are doing in order to try and mitigate that disruption is be really clear with the timelines for each funding opportunity. So that should be very clearly outlined in every single funding finder page. Particularly for responsive mode, we've moved to a round-based system to manage that change in a more structured way, making sure that we can still be equitable toward all of our applicants and make sure that everybody within each batch is receiving the same type of treatment. Now, that does mean that compared to the way that we were managing responsive mode before, there could be some applicants that are actually experiencing a slight delay. Again, we're hoping those clear comms and it will help to really manage expectations, and we endeavour to meet those targets wherever we possibly can. I would say we are keeping this system under review. The round-based system is an interim measure that we have at the moment. UKRI is actually sort of in the midst of a call for evidence from applicants, research office colleagues as well, in order to work out what the best way forward is, sort of a harmonised UKRI response to whether we continue in rounds or go back to responsive mode. So thank you for bearing with us, is what I would say. And if you have any applications that you're particularly worried about, say they're not meeting the targets that are listed on funding finder pages, please do drop us an email and we will very happily investigate for you.
Thank you, Ruth. We've had a couple of questions relating to the updating in training materials. I wondered, could anyone perhaps comment more on what these the revamp in training materials will look like? And as a follow-up, we've had a specific question about whether there'll be any further guidance surrounding ethics issues. Someone suggested, is there going to be a point of contact for guidance concerning these trickier questions?
I'm happy to start with that one. So I think the point on ethics, I think, stands for the general point around training. So as I think Beth mentioned, part of the PRC development project that we want to do is really considering training and making sure things are in better places for you. So currently we've got quite a lot of information in kind of PowerPoints and in sort of different places on our website. And part of that is pulling it together so that when you are doing a review or sitting on a panel, it's very easy to get at the information you actually need. So part of that, I think, is to do with signposting, but also using the insights from this survey to reflect on things that people would like a little bit more reassurance on. And that might look like ethics, that might look at some of the tensioning of high risk, high reward stuff that we've kind of mentioned today as well. I guess that's the sort of the big picture answer. I think on a more specific level, what we try and do when we email you about reviews or panels is to give you a human you can ask things of. And they're really, and those are our wonderful funding officers, and they're really happy to kind of pick up any questions that you have. So if there is a specific thing that you're kind of worried about or want to work through, as in terms of interpreting a piece of our guidance, do pop that in an email to them, and they'll be really happy to pick that up. I suppose the final thing I would say on that is I think we always understand why people want training. It's a big thing to assess and to kind of pass judgment. And so I suppose I just wanted to end on offering a general reflection that we really trust you. You know, fundamentally, we've got you on our college because of your expert judgment and your expertise, and the task at hand is that kind of balancing of the assessment criteria with the application on the page using the wealth of experience and expertise that you've got. So, you know, by all means, very happy to answer specific questions, always happy to help. But I just wanted a point of reassurance that we completely trust you too.
Thank you, Leo. We've got a question which has just come in. I wonder, Christopher, whether you could answer this one. The higher education sector and arts and humanities in particular are facing a wave of redundancies at the moment, both voluntary and involuntary. This seems to be a significant threat to the talent pipeline. Do you have any comments or insights from the survey that addresses this problem?
I'm not sure I have any from the survey. I know it's something that you're concerned about, and that people are worried about that as part of the future. I'm not sure whether Beth spotted anything that gave us an answer, for instance, or any further detail. But perhaps rather than take from the survey, I'll take that question about talent pipeline. I think we do have to think about the reshaping and resizing of the numbers and the places in which arts and humanities is taking place as a research activity. The really difficult thing is to see departments close, and it's incredibly difficult to sit where I am, just as it is in different ways very difficult to sit where you are and see a diminution in the richness and breadth of what we're offering to university students, whatever age and wherever they come from. I'm particularly concerned at cold spots emerging across the system, but a lot of this is an educational issue and not strictly speaking a UKRI one. So we look at it, we watch it, we have responsibilities through researching the parts of the sector, but it's also partly in the way that universities are constructed and the governance of them, the DFE OFS issue. And it's also a matter of local governance. But we are looking at this, and we're trying to think about ways in which we might be able to support the sector to work together better. the funding we gave to the School of Advanced Studies to create a map of research institutes, I think is very interesting, because that map, which you can go and interrogate on the School of Advanced Studies website, shows actually a huge amount of richness, 3,000 data points, hundreds and hundreds of centres and institutes. One of the things that we'll be thinking about over the next while, and with Research England, who also co-funded that work, is how those research institutes might be able to be helped to work together better, so that in times of constraint, resources can be pooled and combined. In terms of talent pipeline, it is the case that there are, roughly speaking, at the moment, just shy of about 20,000 people doing a PhD in arts and humanities in the UK. That's quite a large number of folk. I think that it's not that we're losing people who are able to do or qualified to do the jobs. The jobs are reducing in the academic sector. As some of you will know, I've been quite vocal about thinking hard together about how that PhD pool is helped to see the value of jobs outside the academic sector. It's a conversation we've been having for a very, very long time, but I still think we need to keep going and think about the shape of the PhD and what it is actually training people for, and what are the jobs where arts humanities research happens that isn't in the university sector. So there's actually a lot of arts humanities research, in a way, particularly as we take an expanded view, that is happening in places, in communities. The work that Katie Shaw, for instance, is doing in creative communities, or Helen Chatterjee's leading in the mobilising assets to tackle health disparity. We're seeing lots of really strong arts humanities research happening outside the university sector. We need to think about that as well. I'm not suggesting for a moment that these are answers to the challenge, or that we should, or that I and in any way underestimating the pain that people are seeing at the moment, but those are just some reflections.
Thank you. We've got time for one or two more questions. And we've had this one come in regarding EDI. To what extent are funded projects held accountable for their EDI pledges? And how do we avoid some projects just giving lip service to EDI rather than genuine commitments?
That's a good one. Ruth, you came off mute about the same time as me. Do you want to have a first crack?
I did. I'll talk a bit to reporting, and then please do join in, Christopher. So we are across EKRI looking at how we are reporting on our funding outcomes. So part of the move to the new funding service offers us an opportunity to think about how we're collecting data, how we're actually reporting on that, what expectations we're putting on grant holders. So that's a live piece of work, and this highlights a really important concern that we absolutely must ensure that we factor in. Now, there's also a proportionality question, and I would say that as AHRC, we concentrate significant efforts on our major investments, which actually represent a very large chunk of our funding. And where there are EDI elements to those investments, we have case officers attached to those. Indeed, we've got multiple levels of seniority, and our senior responsible owners are incredibly invested in ensuring that those EDI pledges are in fact realised. So I think what this is sort of showing us is we are moving in the right sort of direction with our larger strategic investments, but there's a bit more thinking potentially to do with some of our smaller investments, and thinking about how we can hold people accountable whilst also operating with our constrained OPEX budget that Christopher referred to earlier. So not a perfect answer, however, I think at least goes some way to sort of demonstrating our real commitment to making sure that we are making positive steps in this space.
Only thing that I would add to that, Ruth, thank you very much, is there's a ref coming up with a pretty large people, cultural and environment proportion. It's open for consultation. Arts humanities folk will be thinking very hard about this, and there will be different views. but I would say that I know that the intention behind focusing on people, culture, and environment was to make sure that that this is real, that it's actually running through our whole approach to research. So there's another mechanism in there which is running alongside the ones that Ruth is mentioning. We just need to, get involved in that consultation and make sure that it's doing the sorts of things that we think should be done around EDI and other aspects of an inclusive culture.
I think we've got time for one final question. We've had applying for AHRC funding is very competitive at the moment. What can we be doing to ensure that applying isn't a waste of time to either applicants or the assessors?
That is a great question. So there are various things that we could do that we don't really want to do. So we could do things like very heavy demand management. We could set targets within organized institutions, say an institution may put X number of things, that sort of stuff. We aren't dead keen on this. I mean, we'll take advice, but we feel that just adds levels of bureaucracy. I think there's a broad encouragement to recognise that you should put in a grant when it's ready. Don't rush just because there are rounds. Those deadlines, as soon as one's passed, another one opens. We're not going to stop funding responsive mode research. The opportunity is not going to go. So take your time and make sure you've got everything in the right place. Think really hard. And I suppose also think very hard about whether we're the right place for your grant. So, are we the right funder for the research you want to do? There are other funders and we should be using the whole range. Obviously, it's important for us as a funder to make sure that we support panels, not to spend too much time on applications that aren't, going to really get through to funding. So we're looking at that. And clearly, AHRC needs to maintain its commitment to support responsive mode as much as it possibly can. And believe me, we are doing absolutely everything we possibly can. I think I would just say, to be transparent, that budgets are not easy to manage across UKRI. It's quite a complicated box. It's not a black box. It's perfectly clear what's happening, but it is difficult in comprehensive spending reviews towards the back end of CSRs. And if we get a rollover without any uplift, there's inflationary pressures which are on all of us, but they're also on us. So we don't get an inflationary uplift, right? Our money doesn't go up. We have to absorb those costs. So I think we need to be honest with ourselves and recognize that this probably is a particularly competitive time. Lots of people have applied because they're excited. There are budgetary pressures. We're end of CSR going into a difficult time. So realism, we will do the best we can to manage, but I really encourage everybody. We'll work with the research management offices as well, but absolutely no point just shoving in an application because you fancy go. Really be very, very intentional about doing it. But the most important thing to say is we're really sorry that we can't fund more because you are all brilliant, which makes the PRC role all the more important at helping us sift through and get the very, very best. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're out of time for questions. So I'll hand back to you, Christopher, to wrap up. Thank you.
So I sort of said the most important thing, which is thank you. I'd like to thank all my colleagues who've made this possible. I'd like to thank our interpreters, Greg and Ruth. Thank you very much indeed for helping us. And thank you for being with us and for the work that you do. I think now we get a little bit of housekeeping from Leo and next steps. Leo.
You do indeed get a little bit of housekeeping. So just to reiterate a couple of points, if there are any questions that we didn't get around to today, please don't worry. As we've mentioned, we will be sending out the webinar recording as part of one of our newsletters, hopefully by the end of this month. and we'll produce a sort of synthesis response of all of the questions that we've had, so we can kind of give all those responses. There's also lots of other bits that I think we want to reflect back to you across the course of this. I think Christopher has started that today, but there's more that we'd like to do, so look out for some of that in our newsletters. If you have an absolutely burning question that you'd like to get a little bit more intel on, please do feel free to email us using the Peer Review College mailbox, and we'll follow those up as quickly as we can. We have a rather unfortunate thing with our newsletters where they inadvertently end up in people's junk filters, which makes things slightly frustrating, but I guess is a fact of modern life. It's well worth adding the PRC newsletter and PRC email addresses to your recognized sender. They're listed on the screen there for you. It just basically means that we can send you all of those kind of insights through our PRC newsletter and any other things that we think might be of interest to you as well. The other thing that I think we also want to stress, recognizing that things can be very busy, is just do tell us if you're unavailable. We are still just about using the JES functionality, which allows you to tell us when you have periods of unavailability. We have a few challenges maybe with kind of linking up all our systems, but we really do try and use that as a first port of call to make sure that we're not sending you something right in the middle of your very busiest time. And we're also very aware that that's something that we want to translate through, so that when JES retires, we're continuing to take that information because we think it's really valuable to not waste your time. And I think the only other final things I want to say is just to reiterate the vote of thanks that Christopher gave to our BSL interpreters, to Greg and to Ruth, and to thank you all very, very much for being with us today. This is the first one of these that we've done. We're really excited to share that PRC survey, and a sort of spoiler for autumn of this year is that we will be asking you again. Part of the value we hope of doing this is being able to ask the same sort of questions on an annual basis. It's hopefully going to give all of us a kind of a sense of the development of the sector, the sense of the things that you're worried about, the things that we need to fix, and also hopefully that we've taken on board what you've told us and we've kind of done some meaningful fixing in the interim period as well. So it's really useful for us to have that sort of continuous feedback loop. We're at time. Thank you so much for being with us today. I hope you have a really lovely rest of your day. And I'm sure we'll be in touch on something very soon.
Thank you, everyone.